All right, so example 1 here. Sarah's riding her bike at a constant speed of 1.5 miles per 1/6 of an hour. What is the unit rate? So just like we did in our other lesson, we're going to start off by setting up that fraction to figure out the unit rate. So I've got miles and hours. Do I want miles per hour or hours per mile? Miles per hour definitely is the more commonly heard of one. So we want miles over our hours for miles per hour. So we're going to take that 1.5 for the miles. That's going to go on the top. And the 1/6 for the hour is going to go on the bottom. So maybe checking my calculator to see if that 1/6 is a nice normalish decimal that we can work with. If so, that'd be fabulous, but it's not. It's repeating, and no bueno with the repeating decimals. We're just going to make a little note here to keep any repeating decimals as fractions, because that is going to affect your answer. You're not going to get a correct answer if you're rounding it, because those numbers aren't the same. 1.6 repeating is not the same as 1.6 or 1.7, or sorry, 0.17. So instead of working with decimals here, I'm going to have to convert these into fractions, which is not too bad because I know that 1.5 is the same as 1.5. So I can really just write that as 1.5, the mixed number. In our last lesson, that's why we reviewed complex fractions. We learned that before doing anything with those complex fractions, we got to turn that mixed number into an improper. So 2 times 1 is 2, plus 1 is 3/2 on the top, divided by that 1/6 on the bottom. And remember, when we are doing complex fractions, we're really just multiplying by the reciprocal there. So I'm taking the reciprocal of the bottom, which is going to turn into 6. So that means I'm doing 3/2 times 6 over 1. And I'm just going to take that back down here. I'm going to do that 3/2 times 6 over 1. Do a little bit of cross-canceling. I could divide both of those pieces by 2. That leaves me with 2 divided by 2 is 1. 6 divided by 2 is 3 on the top. 1 stays, that stays. 3 times 3 is 9, over 1 is just simply 9. And remember, it's not a unit rate or a rate until you put your labels on it. It's not just 9, it's 9 miles per hour. You need that label on it to get your full credits. All right, so that's new. That's not the new. That's what we did in our last lesson, finding those unit rates. But now we're going to use that 9 miles per hour to answer these other questions here, these follow-up questions. So this one's asking, how many miles will Sarah go if she rides for 2.5 hours? Well, she goes 9 miles per hour, so I'm going to take 2.5 and I'm going to multiply it by that 9. This one is going to be easy to work with decimals because I know 2.5 is just the same as 2.5. So I'm just going to turn that into 2.5 times 9. And in my lovely calculator, 2.5 times 9 equals 22.5. And again, putting a label on that because we're talking about real life problems here. 22.5, it was asking me how many miles. So 22.5 miles in 2.5 hours. Excuse me. Okay. So that was one type of a problem where we used multiplication with our unit rate to answer a question. Now, we're going to look at the other way here. So part C, this time, is giving me a number of miles that she rode, but asking for how many hours. So instead of using multiplication like I did in part B, I'm going to go backwards and use division to figure this out. if I'm going 9 miles each hour and I have to go 40.5 miles, that's a division problem. So 40.5 miles divided by my 9 miles per hour. And here you could do this either way. You can do this decimals because 40.5 is the same as 40.5. And then you can just do that division in your calculator. And that gives me 4.5. Again, just making sure you're putting proper labels on this. And if it wasn't a nice normal decimal that we could turn into, then we would just multiply and turn that into an improper and then multiply by the reciprocal like we were doing in the previous problem. So anyways, how many hours did she ride for? 4.5 hours is how many hours she rode for. So that's an example of using and applying that unit rate. We found it and then we used it to answer other questions.